if you would roll call certification of quorum.
Yes, sir. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart. Charles City County, Mr. Atkins.
Bill Cota sitting in.
Thank you, Mr. Cota. Chesterfield County, Mr. Holland.
Present.
Goochland County, Chair Lumpkins.
Present.
Ms. Lascalette. Hanover County, Vice Chair Peterson. Mr. Davis. Henrico County, Ms. O'Bannon. Here. Mr. Thornton. New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Present.
Mr. Tiller. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams. Ms. Carmack. City of Richmond, Dr. Newville.
Here.
And Mr. Addison. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody should have the agenda. There's several things to pick up over there. But the executive committee agenda, if there's any requests to add, amend the agenda, please speak up. If not, we'll move forward with the agenda. Next item, and is Chet, can you hear us?
Hey, good morning.
Good, thumbs up.
You're present now.
Chet is with us, he's in
present.
Phoenix at a scenario
She got you
planning
as well, but-
meeting. Welcome, Chet, and
Thank you, Mike.
so, and Mr. Peterson joined us. All right, so Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our January executive committee meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges, and second, Dr. Newville, thank you.
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? All right, we have the minutes approved, Ms. Parkman. Chet, if you can unmute and give us your secretary's report?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the patience in me being remote today. Hopefully the sound is coming through okay. As the chair mentioned, I am in Phoenix. Stu Barrial from our staff and I are presenting today about our scenario planning project that is underway, and we're excited about that and the ability to. We've talked about this in the past to be an example of how to do planning the right way, and this is something that's going to bring attention to our region and the work that we're doing as a body. So thanks for your patience in me being a remote attendee today. I'm looking forward to the rest of the meeting. Mr. Chair, I don't have any other updates.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll roll right along into other business. As you all recall, this committee was tasked by the policy board to take the lead on our transportation forum planning. Yes, let's do that. And let me explain. If you grabbed, Janice is going to hand out two. There's two memorandums. One is going to have the RRTPO letterhead at the top, and that is what Chet provided to me a few days ago, and then yesterday we were going back and forth, and I just made some edits to it. I had some comments and suggestions, and so what Janice is handing out is just a little more detail, and please know this is just, you probably look at it and you say, well, certainly, John, you had some help on this, and yes, I did phone a friend. On the second one, again, my edits to what Chet provided are in the memorandum that does not have the letterhead at top. So we probably should just take a few minutes to let you digest that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just a brief note. I was able to to review that this morning. I apologize for not getting to it last night. I would note that as far as I know, the people that you've outlined in the edited version have not been approached. So I would raise just for everyone in the room to be aware that we don't have commitments from any of these people yet. So that should be part of the discussion. And I don't know since we are streaming live, whether it will be prudent to list them, unless it's just in the matter of these are subject matter experts that might be good candidates.
Absolutely, thank you,
Thank
Chet. That is, and I almost was going to delete those out, but I figured we would, exactly what Chet just did, that this was me last night with some help and had some ideas. And this is where, nobody's been approached, nobody's made any commitments. These are just really early ideas.
His idea. It does say ideas, it doesn't say.
Right, yeah, exactly, panelist ideas. So yeah, we don't need to announce anybody's name out loud. I mean, it's obviously just, this can be shared if somebody wants to, but we don't need to do that. We're just, this was again, just planning. So we're looking at March 17th. Chet, the Main Street station, is that, that's where we're leaning towards? Is the contingency that we just make sure of their availability, or what's the remaining pieces for that to fall into place?
Yes, sir. I know that the chamber is helping us with that, with the logistics of the location, and they had, their plan was to approach, I believe, Mr. Saunders early this week to confirm that morning was available. I don't know if Tyrona is there yet. I think she'll probably be there for the main meeting, but she may be able to provide an answer at that point. But we should know fairly soon, if not today, whether that time was available for the Main Street station.
Gotcha. So I am trying to let people absorb this a little bit before I start open discussion. But I'll just tell you, Chet put a framework together. I tried to build on it. Honestly, I was trying to be a little more specific, and I included that part about the audience, because I think that's been kind of informing our discussions. We talk, I mean, ever since I've been on this policy board, there was a communication component. So I thought we should touch on what we're trying to do here with the audience. And so you'll look in the middle of my memorandum there, some thoughts on audience. And obviously, I think we're trying to reach out to the public, but we're doing that through the chamber and other organizations. But again, when you think of who's the audience at this meeting, at this forum, then what do we want to get across? And I think my view on this has been, we're trying to balance between, trying to do everything with the focused on the chamber's trip, but actually yield something that we will walk away from the meeting, and our constituents and others that are engaged in transportation, they'll walk away with something more than go to Kansas City and ask these questions, right? So I'm trying to find that balance. And I added, if you flip to the back there, I added a component on presentation on Kansas City's recent transportation initiatives and projects and reported challenges. Dave, one of the things I learned is that, well, if you Google it, they're the largest city with free transportation. And they've also done some light rail in the downtown. That's picked up a lot of press, but they, like every jurisdiction, that, you can find articles that talk about ridership isn't what they hope and that sort of thing. But reading it, my mind was racing with thoughts about how we can really help our chamber, the visitors that are part of the chamber and other visitors that are going there to come back with some specifics. And that's where, and honestly, my memorandum, I think, is a little too oriented to the inner city, and I'm in one of the rural outer jurisdictions. I want to work a little bit to tip our hat to some of the rural jurisdictions that are here.
That's the first thing one of the things that I know it's got a lot about the bus rapid transit, but one of the things that I've been picking up on is well, years ago, all the calls I got were from older people who couldn't take the bus because they couldn't walk 2 blocks to the bus stop. And they said, if you can get my transportation to the end of my driveway or end of my sidewalk, I can handle it. And so that was when we developed, where's Ken Williams? Ken back there. We formed a committee and worked out the extension of the taxi service for seniors. And it was in conjunction with the bus company. I mean, it wasn't a big, they had developed it too, but all the taxi drivers, the regular taxi drivers also liked it a lot because, they were picking up people and getting fares and were being paid for it. And it turned out it cost Air County less to have a direct door-to-door taxi service. Air co-payments we dropped significantly. And so I think just having bus rapid transit, that to me is kind of limiting. Certainly would be one of the topics, just as you said.
Right.
But now they're talking about this taxi service in Powhatan. Remember the young lady that came in with
The microtransit.
GRTC,
Yeah.
microtransit?
Absolutely.
And as soon as we started working on that specialized taxi service for elderly, disabled, whatever, there was this, you had to qualify, you had to have a badge like this, that kind of thing. They take your credit card or the way you're gonna pay ahead of time. So when you call, because the thing that got me, just to throw this in, when you called for this taxi service, they could not ask you, do you use a wheelchair or do we need to have wheelchair access? Because it's illegal. Federal government says you can't ask somebody that. So that's why they had to sign up ahead of time.
Right.
Those are the things we learned that you would not think of.
Right.
Okay, so, where was I going with this? It was exactly what
Well,
you said. Don't just.
You don't want it to be so
track-
narrow.
Narrow,
Right.
because that was something that kept coming and coming, but I know what it is. As soon as we really got started on that, Uber and Lyft showed up and said, we want to take over this process. This is why, and we said, we didn't really know who they were at that time. But it was a company because the main thing that happened was, who do they call, who handles it? We ended up with GRTC. But they came in and said, we'd like to take this over because we have, we have the Uber and Lyft people.
Right.
Well, so don't get too concentrated on one thing because somebody else, free enterprise like with Uber and Lyft, when there's a need, which is what, doing surveys and I'd figured out, at least for my area. Suddenly somebody else realizes there's a way for me to make money doing this. And so Uber and Lyft and another company that I can't recall right now. But when you know, what we need to know is where is the problem and what is the problem exactly. Because I remember clearly the first time I said it while I was sitting with this organization and said, people are telling me they don't want to take the bus because they can't get to the bus stop. They want it at the end of their driveway, and everybody laughed. And I said, but you don't understand. They're in a walker or they're in a wheelchair.
Sure.
And there may or may not be a sidewalk, or if it's 3 blocks or 4 blocks away, that's a long way to go. But again, another company also had figured out there was this need. So free enterprise took over without government really needing to do it, but they wanted to get in on the action.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
But that's one of the reasons we initiated Hanover Dash in Hanover County, for that very reason. That's, it's proven to be very successful. Just a couple of questions. You've got the presentation on the Kansas City transportations things. Is it possible we could have something from Kansas City's transportation people before the meeting that to present to us? I don't know how many members of our board are going to be going on that intercity visit. My experience on the ones I've been on in the past is a very positive event. As we learn a lot of things to do and things not to do going on these visits. And many times the things we learn is things to don't do. At the same time, a lot of it is we learn from each other, those that are traveling on the trips. But this here should be pointing those who are going to Kansas City at things to look at while they're there. And that would be best if we had somebody from Kansas City saying, hey, these are the things we're proud of, things we before.
And challenges and whatnot. So I'll let Chet weigh in. One of my best friends from high school is a surgeon out in Kansas City, and I texted him yesterday about this, if he had any contacts. He didn't have any contacts, but he was telling me about some of the things that have gone on, the light rail and that stuff. And I had asked Chet if he had some contacts there. Okay. Chet, can you weigh in?
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually working directly with the chamber to set up the transportation track for the trip. And I'm working with our contemporaries at the MPO in Kansas City to set that up. The focus is going to be, it looks like it's going to be two distinct things. One is the impact that the streetcar has had. That is currently under development for, I believe, 2 extensions of what they have now. I think that'll translate directly to the work that's being done by GRTC in our region to look at expansion of the Pulse as well as other high frequency service. All the economic development impacts of something like that, I think directly translate to what we're doing. The other thing is that the airport, a very similar situation to what we have in Richmond. People come into the airport in Kansas City and don't have direct ways to get to their destinations, whether that's hotels or conferences or sporting events. And we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from the MPO as well as the airport and the jurisdictions about the plans that are in place. The difference is Kansas City is lined up to host the World Cup in 2026, as well as I believe the NFL draft is going to be in Kansas City very soon. So they are under the gun to get this figured out. So I think there's going to be a lot to learn with the relationship between the airport and transportation for a large volume of people to get to the rest of the region. So those are the 2 focus areas for the trip. For the transportation track on the trip. And my intention was as we started developing this agenda for the forum in Richmond was to kind of set those things up, but really focus more on the connection, not the content that Kansas City is doing. That's for the Kansas City folks to describe, but to start to make the connection between the work that's being done in Richmond and the region, the good things, the bad things that you mentioned, Mr. Chair, and kind of start to put the prompts out there, as Mr. Peterson, I think, is saying, for the attendees on the trip to start to look for, so they can compare what we're doing in Richmond versus what is being done in Kansas City. So a primer, I think, is kind of what my hope was for the transportation forum.
So do you, and when Mr. Peterson suggested we hear from Kansas City, do you think we should hear from somebody in Kansas City? And I think, do we want to hear from them before and gather that input now, or do we want maybe Kansas City remote, like we're doing now, remote participation at the forum? And what were you thinking, Mr. Peterson? Just some now to have some context now to help us, or actually have somebody.
I don't want to get into the weeds of whether we bring somebody in from Kansas City, have somebody here who knows something about it, or remote. I'm just saying that we probably ought to have some knowledge presented at this information as to what they are doing in Kansas City.
Gotcha.
So that those who are going on the trip can look for that.
Gotcha.
When we're there.
I agree, and I'm going into the weeds a little bit because March 17th, I'm trying to put an agenda in and actually say what's going to happen at the meeting and what do we need to do before the meeting to bring it in. I mean, there's a lot we could pull from just online and through the context that Chet's talking about. I think we can bring some, and I know Chet, you're talking about making the connection between Kansas City and here. I agree with that, but I hope we can also send them away with specific questions. Send our visitors away with specific questions so that when they come back, we can say, what are the answers to the questions? Because we're going to have similar challenge, ridership. I don't know, MCI Airport in Kansas City, I think that's not in the heart of the city, that's out. So you have the same challenge. And related to this, I was at a dinner Monday where Danny Plow, I think is his last name, he's executive director of Virginians for High-Speed Rail. And and the questions at the meeting ended up being a lot of discussion. Okay, you're going to get rail from Richmond to DC, Richmond to New York City, and a little bit of Richmond to Raleigh. And it's all the questions are like, can you get the time down? Can we do an express so it doesn't stop all along the way? And the goal is to get us to DC, you know, make it attractive so that the train is just as easy. But one person in the audience asked what I think is an obvious question. If I'm going to Richmond to DC, if I get to Union Station, then there's a transportation infrastructure to get me to lots of other places around DC. If I go to, what is it, Penn Station in New York, there's a lot of infrastructure. But if we're the other way coming to Richmond and somebody lands at Main Street Station, what do you do? And then his answer was, well, there's the Pulse. But that brought some groans from the audience because I think people see the Pulse as limited. I can go, you know, and then he said, well, there's Uber and Lyft. But I think I'd like to see how cities are dealing with that. And the other thing about Danny Plow's presentation, he had when you look at the urban crescent, going out to Hampton Roads, Richmond, and Washington, DC, the projected numbers are amazing about how many people are going to, a large percentage of Virginia's population is going to be in that urban crescent. And we cannot pave our way out of the traffic problem. The numbers just don't work. We cannot pave our way out. So that's his lead in to high-speed rail. And then the question is, well, how does it work? Then the question I think for Richmond is, how do we move people regionally once they get here that way? Because I look at the city, I look at the growth near my office towards the western end of the city, and I hear anecdotally, I have a brother-in-law in Loudoun, and he's like, oh yeah, I've got lots of people that are in Loudoun here that are moving to Richmond. And that's what we're hearing. People from DC, you know, when companies are finding you can be remote. So Richmond, it looks like Richmond, and the numbers in the Richmond Times-Dispatch article, what was it, earlier this week? And I told Ms. Page, you got like, what, 5.2% population growth in UCAN just in the last 2 years.
8% in Goochland.
Yeah, Goochland was second. I hate being second to UCAN, but.
We hated it, so that's why we moved on up.
So anyway, all that's set up to like I'm trying to draw from those things and say what's relevant for this transportation forum. So I'm gonna stop talking and y'all.
If I could ask one,
Yeah.
this time I'm really getting down to weeds, and this is probably a question more for Dr. Newbill. I've been to events at the Main Street Station before. The space is huge. Is there a way to break this down so it won't be, because we could have a big group in there and it still feels small in that space if we don't have a way to break it down?
There are ways to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it.
Because I've been there before when they didn't break it up. You had a good sized group and you felt like there was nobody there.
Yeah,
There are ways to partition the curtains, et
Okay.
cetera, to
Good.
I have
address
a
that.
question earlier.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're going to, well, is the forum for the TPO members or you're going to invite the public? That's what you're saying, is you're going to invite others.
Well, the chamber, we hope to invite, and I hope to invite, once we get this date pinned down, obviously Chamber RVA, but I've told Chet from the beginning, I want to invite the local chambers, make sure, we want as many, we want as people. Now, you asked the key question, who is it for? Well, that's what I was saying earlier. I think since we've started this, there's a balancing act. I don't want the policy board members to say, well, I spent a day and I got nothing out of it. So I'm trying to find that balance between what's helpful to the chamber, what's helpful to the public, what's instructive, informative, what's engaging on
In 2005, I'm pretty sure it was 5, it was either 2004 or 2005. I went on a trip with a group from the National Association of Counties to Germany and light rail and high-speed rail, and it was because of the Richmond to Raleigh route. You know, they invited me to come, and I learned a whole lot in Germany. The key factor here, though, is you need enough people, you need density. And if you're gonna go with some kind of specialized transportation, you were saying from Main Street Station, here, it's gonna be because of tourism. You know, it's not gonna necessarily be the people that live in the area. You're gonna get the density you need from the tourists, you know, to make it something like that, or high-speed rail or all that. It's obviously density. Washington DC is the capital of the country. And you have to get to the hotel. When I step out of Main Street Station, I get a taxi to the hotel where I'm staying. And there are tons of them because there are people lined up. Yes, it's DC. New York's the same way. But I think where is the density gonna be and where is it going is one of the questions.
Well,
It's gonna
and-
be because of tourism, but you don't have tourism people here.
And that's why you're leading into, look at the objectives of the form R21, review demographic trends on where people and companies are choosing to locate. I think that ties into that. And I think in addition to density, you're just talking raw numbers too. When you look at the raw numbers, New York City, the number of people. I was down in Raleigh last Friday, a week ago, and they've built another belt line. They're building a lot, but I don't see any evidence of a lot of robust public transportation network down there. And and that's, you've got Research Triangle, but so yeah, density and I think just the volume of numbers. So, but that's things we could talk about. Is Richmond growing to that point? Yes, John.
My only comment was gonna be maybe broaden the topic, not just be bus rapid
Right.
transit, but transit in general, and that opened the door to
We
talk
were,
about Mike.
the thinking was to identify major projects that we can speak to. So I'd love to get, because we really picked two things, the BRT and greenways and trails. I'd love to have a replacement for one of those.
I don't know that they need to be replaced, but to Mr. Hodges' point, I'm really interested in us looking at the multimodal transport. So how are we tying together trains, planes, buses, going down to the port, both city, regional. So I like these sub areas, but to the extent we can talk about how those pieces are coming together or what we're looking to do to facilitate that connective tissue there. And then under audience, I would add Greater Richmond Partnership, because they look in terms of us, as businesses come in, some of them, and look to bring employees, how are we gonna get them around? It would not wanting to put everybody on highway, so I just think they'd be an additional audience.
I'll reach out to Ms. Wakefield and I'll make sure she's in the loop on that.
Okay.
And some of y'all might even be board members of the GRP or
I
something.
am.
Yeah.
So can I
Yes.
can I hand that off to you to
Sure.
let, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Dr. Newell, I'll let you definitely reach out to Ms. Wakefield
Sure.
and let me know what, we can do to.
I would
But something that
suggest
gives them-
expanding beyond that even to Richmond Region Tourism, this
Yeah,
group.
absolutely.
The
All of it.
sports backers, all of these groups are all involved and their activities all depend on transit. So
I would agree.
let's venture Richmond, all these people should be invited to the forum.
Well, just remember, a huge, I wish Jim was here, but a huge portion of the airport's funding is from their parking. So they use the bus service for employees, but I'm also gonna tell you, if you want to get from Richmond to Dulles and you're anticipating using the rail, the metro, it doesn't work that well either. So people who are getting on the plane usually will somebody will drop them off and they'll park, or they want a taxi. But for using getting the employees to these positions is the other part you need to think about. But that would, and when I have another joke, but I'm not gonna tell them. My joke is, all right, you get Dan Schmidt there, remember his company is parking cars
Gotcha.
for events. But again, I think tourism would play a big part on planning transportation. Because the first thing that happens is a whole group, like you were just saying, whole group shows up and stays in a hotel, but they all need to get over here. And you need buses to get them there, Or is there some way to plan transportation if the events are on a regular basis? So having a tourism person here would be good. That's all.
Okay. So stepping back a little bit, what's y'all's reaction? And Chet, you're gonna obviously take what we discuss and with the chamber, and the chamber is taking some of the lead on this as well, but I want the chamber to know, that we're digging into this, that we want to structure it, but certainly we want, their engagement. So where I'm going with this is, stepping back, what about the format that we had? We'd had a discussion and then the breakout / tabletop conversations. That, and if you look at, let's see what I think somewhere in my provisions, I put some options. Breakout, oh yeah, I said breakout and or take, on 10:15, that's me, breakout and or tabletop conversations. And the first part is what I've mentioned before, presentations with local transportation staff at stations like a school fair. That's still out there. Do you all have a reaction to that versus a panel discussion and we just break out into tabletop discussions? Or would you like to have do you see any value or thinking that it would be worthy to get people up walking around for 35 minutes, engaging with local staff, local transportation staff who are presenting on, so I can walk up to Henrico's team and say, hear them present about, these are major transportation projects we're working on, this is how we approach it, that sort of thing. I think that would be valuable to the policy board. So any reaction to those two pathways?
It's a little like herding cats. It's sometimes hard to get people, when you have a lot of breaks and you break them down, getting them back focused, having a presentation of the topics and then sort of breaking down at the end.
Don't make it too unwieldy. Be careful about making it a little too unwieldy.
And 1:30 is a little late. I mean, if you can start at 8:15 or 8:30 or something, if you say 9 o'clock, you know, I'm not sure people can hang necessarily on that long.
Yeah, that's why we did the giveaways at the end to make them hang in there.
Yeah,
But I agree, this thing, well, you can see, in Chet's one, it says, no more than 3 at breakfast, meeting no more than 3 hours.
yeah.
I think probably somewhere between the 3 hours and what I'm talking about here is, I mean, we want it, again, this is, it's not, it's what this committee decides, so.
Well, they may decide about leaving.
Well, yeah, and I thought about the putting, and I just stuck the Kansas City piece at the end, but I thought that probably needs to be moved up because that's kind of important. But the other draws, we'll keep them there. But I don't know how many people will look at it. Some people look at that, it's like, I can leave it. I can leave at 12:15 because I don't really care what's going on in Kansas City. Yes, Chet?
My only suggestion in this part of the conversation is to keep it on the shorter end. I think especially if we're trying to get members of the community and business community and Richmond Region Tourism and GRP and other folks engaged, it's not to keep them, because the people will start walking out.
Yeah.
Because they have other things to get to. So
Okay.
I think my suggestion is this is a great start, the version that you put together, and it's obvious that the executive committee is excited about it. We'll do everything we can at the staff level to support putting it together in this format, and then I feel like we need to work towards shortening and streamlining it just a bit.
That sounds good. So,
Chair, I would just suggest setting noon as a deadline at the end of this thing, period.
wrap up by noon
Wrap up by noon, and just whatever we need to.
or do the giveaway
Yeah,
at noon.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't agree more. Cut and shorten it and make sure like versus 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. Because people are gonna move in and want ready to move out.
Yeah.
But we always good to have discussion. I agree.
So noon, you shoot for the start like we're starting but 9 to noon, so we're back to really if we, except for some maybe initial networking time and a continental breakfast, we are trying to keep the program, looks like to 3 hours if we start at 9 to noon. So I don't think we can break, I mean, then if we talk about hot topics plural, and I think in yours, at least one of your versions, Chet, I saw something about issues, what are the hot topics? I mean, we've got two, maybe one way, if we want to keep both the BRT and the greenways and trails, we combine them into one discussion. We're going to talk about two hot topics in one discussion. But is there another or other hot topics?
Well,
Yes.
This is more where we're coming from, but this is a really big picture, but I know that always boils down to, I remember one exercise where everybody came in and used Legos or something, and they built a city and what they wanted it to look like, and and it was just really great, but it could never happen because there's not enough money. I mean, and you couldn't do it fast enough, you know.
Right.
So when he talks, whoever talks about demographic trends, is there any way to get something in there about funding sources? Is it that too?
Well, that would probably be a different person, but certainly, I think,
That would be for, and it wouldn't be just for us. When you start telling the people who are there that there's limited
Right.
funding,
sure.
they don't wanna hear it, I know, but, you know,
Look at
some
the-
short version.
Look at the 1215, on the back page, look at the 1215,
Okay,
moving from planning to building.
yeah, okay,
So I think that's where we would fit that piece in. Like, okay, we've got the demographic information, we've got the challenges,
yeah,
and then we have a couple of major projects. And I think when you frame the challenges, you'll see, you know, people will have ideas where we want to go. I think it was you that said about connecting the multimodal, or, well, it was Dr. Newbill. I would, because I think that's kind of where this probably needs to head. And I think if we look at Kansas City, that's probably what they and other big cities are trying to accomplish, is to tackle that. You know, I think, Pat, you said, you know, I need public transportation right at the end of my driveway. Well, then that ties into sidewalks and networks and things like that. So I hope we're getting somewhere that is gonna help us get this agenda.
It's a quick suggestion. We're working, Chamber is really taking a big part in this. Why don't we give them a section and let them take charge of what we put in that section?
Mr. Chair.
trust them.
Well, if we want to keep them as partners, we better.
Yeah, we do. Yes, Chad?
A direct response to Mr. Peterson's just recent comment. I don't know if you all have the original agenda that I developed. Under setting a foundation, number one, there's 5 big ideas that are listed there. Those were developed in direct relationship with the chamber. Those are the items that the chamber members would most likely be interested in and would draw them to attend. So that's why those things are listed there, and that's why I suggested that those be kind of the big topics to cover during the forum. Take that for what it's worth. But I think that's the idea of what would be a draw for people outside of our committees.
Thank you, Chet. Thank you for letting us know that. So when I saw those, what is prioritizing, and let's see, we have a few more minutes left. I'd like to drill down. What is prioritizing safety? How does that translate into a forum discussion? I mean, because everybody says, you know, we want people to walk safely down the street, bike safely in the neighborhoods, but what does that translate?
To be blunt, there are people dying on the roads because safety is not a prioritization. It's not a priority for a lot of folks that are in the system. Pedestrians in particular, and that's in all areas. It's not just a downtown thing. So I think the idea there is there's a lot of press recently about issues with all kinds of different things in terms of traffic safety. So that's where we wanted to talk about that. There are ways to do it. There was we could drill down easily into that. There was just an announcement, I believe, yesterday about Safe Streets for All grants through the new infrastructure bill. A number of local jurisdictions received those grants to develop improved plans. They could start talking about what those plans are going to include. So that's a lot of things. If it's okay, I'll just go down the list. So the BRT expansion, the north-south study is being done by GRTC right now with the help of a consultant. There's a lot of work that's being done in regards to that. The West Broad expansion study is being done by our staff in cooperation with GRTC. That's underway. Making parking effective. There's a wealth of surface parking, especially downtown and in the more urban areas of the region. There's lots of discussion now, especially with the city. I'm sure Dr. Newbill could talk for an hour about it. Is that the best use of the highest to best use of the land to have surface parking, or should it be should we look at zoning and other tools to make that use better? Future of freight, the Richmond Marine Terminal, all the work that Barbara Nelson is doing and her team, and how that's going to fit into, all the new economic development that's happening in the region, whether that's Lego or Plenty or the Henrico Sports Complex and how that fits into different things. And then I think a more wonky topic is, how do you plan for big projects? I-64 was kind of an outlier because there were lots of different people at the table for that, but that could be discussed. At some point, there's going to be a discussion about extending Powhatan Parkway. This is where we could be talking about CBTA and what its role is, and how we all work together as a region to make sure that those big projects move forward. So that's just a very quick overview of kind of what the thinking was. But certainly, obviously, this is still a draft, so we can make adjustments as needed.
Okay, we have another item on our executive committee agenda, so we'll try to wrap this up in like 6 minutes and just sail through the last one, but Ms.
So,
Page.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to use your last 6 minutes,
No, go ahead.
but I want to know on this form, what is it that will make the rural localities want to stay here until 12 o'clock?
Yeah.
I mean, we have, so we have Charles City, they have the same issue. So we have connectivity issues. We have how transportation is affecting our economic development there. We don't have, as far as riding bicycles, we don't have that kind of issue down there. As far as where we're gonna walk, we don't have that kind of issue down there. But what in here would make us jump up and be there at 8 o'clock and stay till 12 o'clock? What are we gonna discuss? How do we get to the train? We have Amtrak that comes through New Kent and Charles City, just what divides us. As a matter of fact, it used to stop there. So are there any future plans for that? Those type of things, when we say that, how do jurisdictions outside the 4 large jurisdictions perceive success? It
That's what I
succeeds
added.
when it includes all the members of the TPO.
Well, I added that because that's a question I have. So economic development is where we need to go with that, I believe, because that's how I see it, at least in Goochland, where we have the eastern part of Goochland, we have the service district, we have West Creek, we have places that are ready, poised to grow. So that's why I'm interested in review demographic trends on where people and companies are choosing to locate. If they come to New Kent, if they come to Goochland, if they come to Powhatan, Charles City, what are these folks, what would draw them to there? And is it a robust infrastructure for people to get moved around, to go to the city, to be reconnected to the region? Is it, would you want folks to have easy transportation from the more populated centers to come out and work at a location in New Kent?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the piece I'm trying to connect
Okay.
to, is this has to be regional component. And to me, it all comes back to economic development.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, I won't be redundant, but I was going there. That's number 2 on the chats, defining regional. I think it's going to be critically important that we, and especially speaking to Ms. Page, but that we understand that this is across the region and it's multimodal. And the issues of equity and inclusion will be important as well, because that will address, can you get to your sidewalk or to wherever, and other kinds of issues. So it must include, in 2023, we have to be talking regional.
I have
Yeah.
one thing that always has come up is in areas like New Kent and Charles City, the ride sharing program that GRTC did, where you park and then a bus or a van comes by and the person riding the van, you've heard these, I'm sure. And in some cases, they drive all the way to DC. But I assume they're still doing that,
But it needs to be part of a there needs to be strategic intentionality around that transportation and the various components, so it's all tied together and creates that web across the region. It's catalyst for economic development. Why are people bringing businesses? Why are people moving here? How do they move? So.
And this is stuff that I think can translate to Kansas City, that we can ask them, because there's Liberty, Independence, there's Kansas City, Kansas, there's places, it's a widespread area, so I think they have the same, the same challenges. Or so they would have comparable challenges.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was going to say, going back to a previous comment made, Pat, I think it's wonderful. I love the brainstorming, but we have to put price tags on what this entails, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Can we afford this and how long and the timing thereof of getting it and bringing this to fruition? I think those things need to be put out there and discussed, but brainstorm, but no reality, what the universe we're living in.
But the limit, I think, and this goes to when he's talking about prioritizing safety, and he said, to be blunt, people are dying because it's not a priority. So I think it's, if we make.
It should be discussed.
If we'd have that tough discussion and talk about prioritizing, the same thing is like, okay, are we not going to build, are we gonna not widen a road and take that money and do something else with it?
Yeah.
Build more of a ride share.
Yeah, we've missed it if we do not take safety into account.
Right.
People's lives, we missed the most important feature of it all.
Pedestrians, we
Yeah.
just had the example down Houston.
Pedestrian safety, but of course, that tends to be more where, like Ms. Page said, there's not a lot, we have places to walk, we have safe places to bike, so I think the multimodal in the rural areas is more cars primarily, but then maybe, changing to transportation if you need to come to the city, having an alternative.
We have ride share, but you have to get to ride share.
Exactly.
If they bring GRTC, which they come, I think, to Seven Pines, then how are we gonna get from Bottoms Bridge to Seven Pines? And with a cab type transit system that we have, or on-call on-call transportation system that we have, then what can we do to make that full-time? And can we do a study to see if it's feasible to make it full-time? We have seniors that can't get to doctor's visits
Right.
because they can only get to Bottoms Bridge.
Money is the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Henrico County is the #1 funder for GRTC, not the city of Richmond, because we subsidize that, and that is the #1 route, is the one you're describing, most people ride that. If you extended it out, then I assume New Kent or Charles City or in the area they would end it, they have to come up with the funding to offset the costs. It costs
Mr.
money.
Chair.
I go back to money.
Let me get David wanted to weigh in.
Okay, I just, actually, if I could, if you don't mind, David, that's
Go-
fine. I just want to suggest that we amend the agenda to remove 4B and continue this conversation. I think that agenda item deserves more time than we have to give it today.
Okay, all right, that's fine, we'll,
So,
I don't see any objection to that. All right, Chet, I think we're getting,
Oh, I do have an objection. I mean, he took my time.
I'm giving it back, yes, you can have it.
But he was going with you.
9:27.
Yeah, I've seen a tag team before. That was a handoff.
he yields back his time to you.
Right.
I gave you all seat that time.
You probably heard this before at CBTA. I'm sure you've heard it down here. The jobs aren't in Powhatan County.
Yes, sir.
The jobs are in New Kent County. They're not in Charles City. Mr. Carter, who I haven't seen for a while, welcome. Thank you. Good to see you. But he made the famous statement. He says, we don't even have a stoplight in Charles City. I still use that because that goes back to the question, Ms. Page asked earlier. What is this about the rural jurisdictions? Well, again, the jobs aren't in Powhatan County. We have to go to where the jobs are. Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield, and to a lesser extent, to my colleagues' county, Hanover County, where I go to Green Top, Bass Pro, do the stimulus package. So we have to have a regional transportation system so that the people, the workforce, Powhatan, New Kent, Charles City, can go to where the jobs are. And if we can't get there, And let's go back to something was said about, multimodal. We're looking at micro-transportation now, coming to the rural communities. Let me opine just briefly on that. It does nothing to get the people from Powhatan to the jobs. It's a pilot area. In that pilot area, it does nothing to get the people to where they need to go for medical appointments, which in most cases are outside the county. Something that Mr. Peterson and I talked about at the meeting back in Ashland on November 1. So when we talk about connecting to the outside world, with these pilots and connecting to the existing system with GRTC, it doesn't do that in Powhatan County. And I doubt that it does in New King County or Charles City. So I just want to focus the conversation back again. What are we trying to accomplish? I don't want to do something just for the sake of saying we're doing it. We have micro transportation in rural counties when it really doesn't meet our requirements. Those are my comments, Mr. Chairman.
That would be part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intermodal transport.
But it was in
I
6 minutes.
think we have, you'll reach out to Greater Richmond Partnership,
Absolutely.
and if y'all think about letting some other folks, reach out to us, let staff know, let Chet know, if you're finding folks that are interested in, because we want to tailor this to the audience, and there's obviously an economic component if we bring, it is an economic component. Chet, do you think we have enough for you and I obviously you'll deal with the chamber. We'll take between what we put together here and talked about. We know the marching orders are noon end time, or at least do the giveaway starting at noon and wrap up shortly thereafter. That's one. We'll pin down the location. We'll make sure the location is set up in a way that is appropriate for the crowd. And I think we're going to move between having local transportation, fare kind of things. I think we'll stay away from that. We'll maybe do a breakout tabletop conversation on hot topics. We'll see. Yeah, there might be enough to pack in just presentations. We'll obviously have to have stretch breaks. Any last direction from this group, or at least for today? It's not the last time we can speak up, but anything you want Chet and I to run with that we haven't talked
You
about?
got the letter about the park and ride stuff.
Yeah, that's coming up
Yeah.
I think that's in the next meeting.
The only thing I can say is they need cameras, security cameras, because people are stealing the catalytic converters out when they're parked there, and then they park there. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I think that's in the policy board, right? That's in the policy board packet. Yeah, we'll talk about that letter in policy board.
Just keep that in mind.
Lots of needs. Thank you all. Not enough time, but I can tell once we get rolling, I think we'll have plenty to talk about. And I think we'll have a good audience, and determined to have a good meeting and get these folks to get us some information from Kansas City, because I think a lot of cities are facing the same challenges.
I hate to ask this question, but in the consent agenda, this says that you're gonna be using a consent, this is discussion for the regular meeting, right?
Yeah, Chet, can you take a couple of minutes and introduce us to the,
No, it's gonna be in the regular meeting.
it's in the regular meeting.
Okay.
I think we're good. Because it's already a little after 9:30. Let's stretch for a few minutes,
Okay.
and we'll call to order in about 5 minutes.
Thanks for adjourning.
Thanks
for adjourning.
Close it down. Okay.
There you go.